Hello, my name's Kingsley Singleton and welcome to this Photoshop and Elements video lesson. As photographers, most of the time we like to steer clear of mist and fog, heading out on nice clear days to give us the best possible view of the landscape we're shooting. But there are times when some subtle mist or fog can really improve a scene, giving it a much more mysterious atmosphere. Mist can be fleeting though, and if you do find some out on your travels, it'll seldom be in the right place. That's why in this tutorial you'll find out how to put some convincing digital mist right where you want it. Now, because the method I'm going to use in this tutorial revolves around using adjustment layers in Photoshop or Elements, it means you can easily control the amount and thickness of the mist and define exactly where you want it to go using the brush tool. As you'll see from the example image, we've built up the effect using two separate layers. This way we get some real depth to the mist, and using the attached masks that come with the adjustment layers, we can make very precise choices about where it sits on the landscape. So here, for instance, our foreground rock and the top of the mountain are unaffected, but we've let it sort of creep through the rest of the valley. And as I said to kick off, this just adds a bit of extra atmosphere to the picture, and also it gives a bit of depth to the landscape because we've got these nice recessive tones now. Okay, let's see how it's done by closing down our example image and opening up the start picture. That's called mist.jpg, and you'll find it on the disk. So with our start image open on screen, the first thing we need to do is bring up the layers palette. Mine's just floating here on screen already, but if you can't see yours, come up to Window and down to Layers. That'll make it appear. And then to start adding the mist effect, we're going to add an adjustment layer. We do this by clicking on this little icon down near the foot of the palette in this case, although in some versions of Photoshop Elements it'll be at the top. Give that a click, hold the mouse button down, and we're going to choose Levels from the list. As soon as we do that, a Levels palette appears on screen, allowing us to make some changes independent from the background layer there. And what I'm going to be doing to add the misty effect is kind of opposite to what we normally do with the Levels palette. Normally we use it to increase the amount of contrast in the picture. What I'm going to do in this case is click and drag the black output level slider all the way over to around about 180. And there, as I do that, you can see quite a lot of the detail in the picture kind of disappearing. And it all looks as though it's being covered with a kind of a heavy blanket of fog. We don't want to use the white output level slider in this case because that will just turn everything grey. Just use the black output level there and bring it over to somewhere around about that amount. Once you're done with that, just click OK to exit the palette. And now, of course, we need to start bringing back some parts of the scene because at the moment we've got just this kind of very dull and thick and omnipresent blanket of mist. We want it to work much more realistically with the existing landscape. The way we're going to do this, as I said in the introduction, is using the attached layer mask that's right next to the adjustment layer there. We're going to be painting black and white and shades of grey into this mask, just controlling how that contrast adjustment that we made using the adjustment layer is affecting the image. To do this, we're going to need the brush tool, so give that a click in the toolbox. And then to start off with, we're going to push its size all the way up to about 600 pixels. That should be okay. And then we want to make sure that it has a nice soft edge. So just click on the hardness slider in this case and drag that all the way down to 0%. But if you don't have a hardness slider there, all you need to do is hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and press the left square bracket key a few times. That'll soften up the edge a treat. Next thing we want to do is make sure our opacity is up at 100%. And then finally, before we start painting into the mask, we'll make sure that black is set as our foreground colour, and we can do that by just clicking on the default colours icon there and then switching them around using the arrow. And then we can just start clicking and painting into our image. We're not actually painting onto the image itself, of course, just into the mask, and there you can see the black paint appearing in the layer mask that's sitting next to the adjustment layer. And everywhere we paint in the black, we hide the effect of this adjustment layer and we reveal those pixels from the layer below. So what I'm going to do is just kind of finish painting at 100% opacity about there, and I'm going to come back up to the options bar and click and drag that slider down, setting the opacity at about 30% this time, and then we can just kind of continue to paint into that part of the scene, just softening that join. And we'll stop just before we reach these rocks in the middle distance, and that's looking okay to me. And then because we want the ridge here to be visible, as well as the top of the mountain, and of course the rock in the foreground that we'll come to later, what I'm going to do is just drop that brush size, and this time I'm going to use the left square bracket key on the keyboard, just tapping that a few times until we come down to about 150 pixels. And then I'm just going to start painting quite roughly in this case along that ridge, not going up to the top of it at the moment, but just a few times. We'll paint that in just until we get kind of a reasonably soft join there. So we're just sort of revealing part of the background, not too much of it at the moment. But already you're starting to see the way that we control how this mist effect is applied to the landscape. To get a nice sharp edge to the top of these rocks here, because we want them to look like they're kind of pushing out of the layer of mist, what I'm going to do is use the shift key along with the right square bracket key on the keyboard, just hit that a few times to harden up the edge of the brush, and then we'll zoom in a bit closer and also drop our brush size, I think, down to around about 80 pixels. And then just continue to kind of paint in to those areas. Just need to bring our opacity back up to 100% as well. And then we'll just very carefully run that brush over the very top of the rocks. And sometimes when you're doing this, it can help just to turn off your mist layer there. And you can see where the kind of the natural line of the rocks goes. Switch it back on again, and you can continue to paint into it. So I'm doing this kind of reasonably fast, but for a really realistic effect, you can take quite a bit of time over it at home. So we'll just continue just to paint up to the edge, something around about that should be okay. We can sort of even up this join in a moment, but I'll just continue right now to paint along until we've got a nice crisp edge to the top of our rocks here, just kind of peeping out from that layer of mist. Right, so we're nearly there, nearly reached the edge of the image now, all the way up there to that final area, and then we can just a little bit more aggressively get rid of some of those other parts of the mist. Okay, so let's come back out to a slightly wider view again, and you can see that just like that, we're starting to build up a very realistic effect. In this part of the image, of course, we need to make sure that we don't paint onto that valley area behind, because we want that to sort of appear as though it's really shrouded in the mist. If you do make a mistake and you paint over it like that, all you need to do then is just switch over your black and white colours there in the toolbox. We'll just drop the brush size a little and paint back in. And this is the real beauty of using the attached layer masks instead of an eraser to apply our mist effect, because it's very adaptable and you can fix any mistakes that you make. And speaking of fixing things, what we want to do is just soften up the join between our non-misty areas and our misty areas a little bit. So once again, using those keyboard shortcuts, we'll just increase the brush size a bit up to about 150 pixels again and drop its edge hardness as well. And then of course just take down that opacity to about 30% again, and just switch back to black as our foreground colour instead of white there, and we can just very subtly apply a nicer join between the two areas. Can take the opacity down even further in this case, down to about 10%, and just continue painting until you've got that nice kind of sweep of the mist as it's coming around the corner there. And we'll just soften the edge off a little bit down here as well. And also any kind of little hard edges that might have been left by our hard brush. And coming back out to a wider view again, that's starting to look really good. And just as I said before, if we want to kind of soften that join up again even more, we'll switch back to white and just paint that mist a little bit further back up onto the ridge there. So that's looking, as I say, pretty good to me. What we can do now is turn our attention to the big rock in the foreground. So what we're going to do, once again, is just bring our opacity back up to 100%, set the foreground colour to black, and now just bring that brush size up a little bit more, I think, up to about sort of 700 or 800 pixels, and then paint that black into the mask, just sort of mainly over the centre of the rock at the moment. Don't go too near the top, because a bit like the ridge up there in the midground, we want to use a harder brush there just to kind of peep over the top of the mist. Just about that kind of thing with our large black brush there will do the trick. Then we'll drop our opacity again, this time down to about 20%. Another keyboard shortcut for this is just to hit the numeric keys. Just hit the number 2 and it'll take it straight down to 20%. And then we can just continue to brush away that mist, just subtly removing it from those foreground areas until we've got something like that. We're just going to leave it a little bit along the bottom of the landscape there, just as though it's kind of beginning to creep around our feet as it sort of floods down the mountainside. But that's looking pretty good to me, so we can now take a closer look at the rock. We'll just zoom in on it, and then dropping that brush size again, probably down to about 100 pixels, and once again setting a hard edge to it and making sure that opacity is up at 100%. We can then, very much as we did with the ridge in the midground, just bring back those detailed edges to the rock itself. Now we may want to get in fairly close here so that we can see what we're doing, and just like that, you see I've made a bit of an error there, just kind of gone over part of the background there where we can see the green grass coming through, and because this area has been painted in quite a graduated way, it doesn't really pay to use the painting white method and kind of go back straight in and paint over it. It's probably better that we just hit Control and Z just a couple of times there, just to take us back to our fully misted rock. And then we'll take a bit more care this time, just kind of clicking once or twice over those areas that we want to bring back into full detail, and working slowly and carefully around the top of the rock. Of course, further down we can be a bit more quick with our brushwork, but eventually we'll come right back to the edge of the rock there and keep working down the side of it until it's obvious that we're no longer painting away any mist. Just continuing along the other side now then. And as I said before, it pays to spend a little bit of care and attention on this, so take your time when you're doing it at home on your own pictures. I've just gone over the edge again, a bit sloppy of me. If you do want to kind of follow the painting white back in route, what you want to do is make sure you've got a soft edge back to your brush there, then set its opacity down, once again pretty low, down at about 10%, set white back as your foreground colour, and then just gradually kind of build that effect back in. If you do it too suddenly, the whole thing will look a bit choppy. That's kind of looking okay. So we can return to our hard edge brush with black as our foreground colour, painting at full opacity, and just continue the job we were doing. So nearly got it now, just working all the way around those parts that we want to reveal from the mist, and eventually we'll have the effect completed. So when I come back out to a full view again, we've now got that rock just kind of peeping over the tendrils of mist there as they're kind of working their way down the valley, and it's looking quite realistic, just adding that bit of extra depth to the picture that we're after. So that's the effect pretty much completed, but at this stage it's a good idea to check how good your masking's been and just make sure you haven't missed any little bits, particularly on that foreground rock. The way we're going to do this is just by holding down the Alt key on the keyboard and clicking on the layer mask that's next to the adjustment layer, and there you can see immediately that there are some parts of that rock that aren't completely black. So there we've just been a little bit sloppy, and we need to go back in with our brush tool and just paint over those to remove those white areas. Very quick and easy to do, working on this layer mask preview. And then if we want to even up this join here too, let's just drop our edge hardness there, making it soft again, bring the opacity down to about 10%, and we can just run that soft low opacity brush along there a few times. But in the middle distance, the effect is a little easier to hide, so when we come back to a regular view, just by holding down Alt and clicking on the layer mask again, you can see it's starting to look really convincing. Once you've done all this masking and you want to enhance or increase the effect, it makes sense to use the mask you've already made. In this case, if I click and drag the adjustment layer onto the create new layer icon down there in the layers palette. Just release the mouse button. You can see we get a perfect copy of our adjustment layer. The mist seems to double in strength, but it's still flowing around in the same position that we want it, thanks to the layer mask that's been copied as well. And just to hold back the effect ever so slightly from those foreground areas, we'll just double click on the adjustment layer icon, just to bring back the original levels palette there, and we'll click and drag our black output level down to around about 90 or so. That's looking pretty good, so we'll click OK. And then if the mist in those foreground areas is still looking a little bit too strong, we'll just go back to our black brush, keep its opacity down at about 20%, and then we'll just kind of paint over those areas where we want to hold the mist back again. And there you can see those grey areas appearing within the mask. Okay, so as I say, that's starting to look pretty good to me. We can probably just run the brush over those areas a few more times, just to kind of reduce the impact of that mist. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So that's our misty landscape completed. All that's left to do is either save it as a Photoshop document if you want to retain your two adjustment layers there, or if you're ready to print it out or share it online, just come up to Layer and down to Flatten Image. And as you can see, if we compare it against our starting version, it certainly adds a lot more atmosphere and depth to the landscape. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you give it a go on your own pictures, and I'll see you next time.